The Arizona Territory, 1873. A lone figure races through the moonlit desert, her white dress torn and muddied from a desperate escape. Behind her, torches flicker in the darkness, her brother and his men closing in. Sarah Kingsley has nowhere left to run when she stumbles upon a solitary campfire. There sits Nakoi, an Apache warrior, watching her with eyes that have seen too much hatred from her kind. Trembling, she collapses at his feet with 7 desperate words. "Can I hide with you? My brother wants children with me." The request hangs in the night air like smoke. What could drive an Apache warrior to protect a white woman from her own blood? What will his answer cost them both? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Boston, 1868. Sarah Kingsley stood tall among her peers at Miss Porter's Academy for Young Ladies. The daughter of shipping magnate Edward Kingsley commanded respect not through haughtiness but genuine kindness. Her delicate fingers moved confidently across the piano keys, while her mother, Eleanor, watched with pride. William, 3 years her senior, had already begun working in their father's company, learning the family business with unusual intensity. "Music is freedom," Eleanor would say, her consumption already leaving her frail. "When everything else fails you, it remains." Sarah couldn't imagine anything failing in their perfectly ordered world. Then the fever took Eleanor in the winter of 1869. Edward, lost without his wife, followed within months. His heart simply stopped one evening at his desk. The funeral reception remained a blur in Sarah's memory, except for William's hand gripping hers too tightly as he whispered, "It's just us now. We must preserve what they built." At 23, William became her guardian. Initially, his protective nature seemed natural, a brother shielding his 18-year-old sister from Boston's opportunistic suitors. He dismissed potential callers with increasing hostility. "They're beneath our bloodline," he would explain, his voice unnervingly calm. Sarah noticed changes gradually. William moved her from her bedroom to one adjoining his. He rejected every suitor without consultation. Her piano lessons stopped. Her correspondence was monitored. The servants were dismissed one by one until only Mrs. Winters, the housekeeper who had known them since childhood, remained. "He's grieving in his way." "Dear," Mrs. Winters said when Sarah confided her concerns, "loss changes people." But her eyes held worry. The first night William came to her room after midnight, sitting on her bed to stroke her hair, Sarah froze in confusion. "We must discuss our future," he said, his voice oddly distant. The Kingsley line must continue. Pure and untainted, each night his visits grew longer, his touch more lingering, his words more disturbing. "Our parents would want this," he insisted. Brother and sister, pure bloodlines, like the pharaohs of old. Sarah found his journal in early spring, hidden beneath account ledgers in his study. The detailed plans horrified her, sketches of their children, names already selected, calculations of bloodline percentages. In his disturbed mind, their union was predestined, necessary, holy. She approached Mrs. Winters that evening, trembling. The old woman listened, face growing paler with each word. "You must leave tonight," she whispered urgently. "My sister's boy works the railroads west. He leaves at dawn." Sarah packed nothing but her warmest dress and what money Mrs. Winters could provide. As she slipped through the servant's entrance, she passed her father's study. Impulsively, she took his pocket watch from the desk, the last connection to the father who had once protected her. The journey west passed in a blur of changing trains, dusty stagecoaches, and constant fear. William would have resources, connections, determination. 3 times she changed direction when she suspected pursuit. Arizona Territory seemed far enough, remote enough. The small settlement of Copper Springs needed a schoolteacher. For 6 weeks, Sarah cautiously built a new life, teaching children by day and sleeping in the small room behind the schoolhouse by night. Then came the letter addressed to the town marshal, seeking information about a mentally disturbed young woman, dangerously confused and separated from her loving brother. That night Sarah ran, Without direction, without supplies, without hope, until the flickering light of a solitary campfire appeared in the darkness ahead. Now, with William's footsteps drawing closer, Sarah's fingers close instinctively around the pocket watch in her dress pocket. The silver is cold against her skin as she waits for the Apache warrior's response to her desperate plea. Nakoi's hands moved with practiced precision, the knife blade revealing the eagle hidden within the cedar. 5 years of solitude had made his fingers nimble for such work. This would be the 5th eagle, one for each family member taken by the bluecoats and settlers. One for his wife, Nasha, one for each of his 3 children, and now one for his father, the respected medicine man who had died on the reservation last winter. The firelight caught the amber flecks in his dark eyes as he studied his work. The white eyes believed the Apache lived only for war, but his people had been artists, healers, and philosophers long before the invaders arrived. Nakoi had been all 3 before the massacre at White Rock Creek. He had been hunting deer when the soldiers came. The blue uniforms had appeared suddenly in the small, hidden valley where his family camped. No warnings, no chances, just gunfire and afterward flames. He found them when the soldiers departed. His family laid out like broken dolls around their burning wickiup. You were a ghost before you even died, the tribal elder had told him when Nakoi returned to the main camp, his eyes vacant. Your spirit walks between worlds now. For 2 years, he had sought vengeance, tracking soldier patrols, leaving bodies where they would be found. The army called him the Shadow. His own people whispered his name like an omen, until the day he held his knife to the throat of a young lieutenant and saw only a frightened boy. Not so different from his own son might have been. That day, Nakoi laid down his weapons of war and picked up his father's tools of healing. Not forgiveness, never that, but a refusal to be consumed by the same darkness that had taken everything. Now he lived in the high country between the reservation and the White Eyes settlement of Copper Springs. The townsfolk feared him, but they also sought him out when their own medicine failed. The trading post owner McAllister was fair with his goods. The old prospector Jenkins sometimes shared coffee and stories of the mountains. The town marshal nodded with cautious respect when their paths crossed. The reservation Apache regarded him with equal measures of awe and pity. A free Apache in a time when freedom was being systematically extinguished. They brought him news when they could, of the changing world, of the government's latest broken promises, of cousins and uncles who had died of white man's diseases in the crowded agency grounds. Come back to the people, his mother's sister had pleaded during her last visit. Your skills are needed. Your wisdom is valued. But Nakoi knew he could not live confined, watching his people slowly wither. Better to remain in the mountains, preserving the old ways, teaching the few young men brave enough to seek him out. Better to be the ghost that reminded both White Eyes and Apache alike that not everything wild had been tamed. His knife paused as the evening breeze shifted, carrying a new scent, human, female, fear. Moving with the silent grace that had kept him alive when so many others had perished. Nakoi placed the half-finished eagle beside the other 4 on his small altar. He reached for his rifle, a concession to changing times, and melted into the shadows beyond his campfire. The woman appeared moments later, stumbling more than running, her white dress luminous in the moonlight. Her hair, the color of sun-bleached grass, had come loose from its pins. She was young, perhaps 20 summers, with eyes wide and wild like a cornered deer, a white woman, alone, in his territory. Nakoi remained motionless, weighing options. He could vanish into the night, leaving her to whatever fate pursued her. He owed her kind nothing. Less than nothing, yet something in her desperation spoke to the healer he had become. The terror in her eyes was familiar. He had seen it in his wife's eyes the day he found her. He stepped into the firelight, watching her freeze at his appearance. Behind her, distant but growing closer, came the sounds of pursuit. Men's voices, horses. The white woman's hunters would be here soon. Whatever decision he made in the next moments would have consequences. For both of them, the white woman's plea hung in the night air like smoke from a dying fire. "Can I hide with you?" "My crazy brother wants children with me." Nakoi stood motionless, his face an unreadable mask as he studied her. Her skin was scratched from desert brush, her breathing shallow with exhaustion and fear. Behind her words lay a story of violation and betrayal that needed no translation across their different worlds. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I have nowhere else to go." Memory flashed like summer lightning across Nakoi's mind, a soldier pulling his struggling daughter from their wickiup. The girl had been just 14 summers, her screams cutting through the gunfire until a pistol shot silenced her forever. His hand moved unconsciously to the beaded wristband his mother had tied there 20 years ago. Its patterns faded, but still visible in the firelight. "A warrior's first duty is protection," his mother had said, "not conquest." The distant sounds of pursuit grew clearer. Men's voices calling a name, Sarah, with a mixture of concern and something darker, more possessive. Horses moving steadily closer. Perhaps 4 riders. One voice rose above the others, cultured and commanding, yet with an edge that raised the hair on Nakohe's neck. "Sarah, I'm not angry. I only want to help you." The woman, Sarah, flinched at the sound, dropping to her knees before him. "He'll find me," she said, trembling. "He always finds me. Decision time." To turn her away would likely condemn her to whatever fate her brother intended. The reservation was 2 days' hard ride. The town would side with her white brother against her word. There were caves in the high country where he could hide her, but reaching them tonight, with her in this condition, would be impossible. "Why should I risk my life for a white eyes woman?" Nakoi asked, speaking the settler language he rarely used. "Your people have taken everything from mine." Sarah's head bowed, her shoulders slumping. Not in manipulation, but in resignation. She had expected rejection. Had come to him anyway, desperate enough to gamble on the mercy of a man her kind called savage. "I know," she whispered. "I have no right to ask." Something in her acceptance of defeat stirred him. She did not beg or offer false promises, just acknowledged the truth and awaited her fate. The voices grew closer. Less than a mile away now. Nakoi made his decision. "You will be safe here," he said, the English words feeling strange on his tongue after so long. "No man takes what is not freely given. Not in my camp." Relief transformed her face, though wariness remained in her eyes. "Thank you," she breathed. "There are conditions," Nakoi continued, his voice firm. "You touch nothing without permission. You do exactly as I say. You make no noise when others are near." Sarah nodded quickly, her eyes darting toward the sounds of pursuit. "And when it is safe, you will go. Back to your own kind." Another nod, though something flickered across her face. Doubt, perhaps, about where her kind truly was anymore. "They must not find you here tonight," Nakoi said, moving swiftly to gather supplies. "It would mean death for both of us." He handed her a worn blanket and gestured toward the small shelter of branches and hides at the edge of the clearing. "Inside, stay silent." Sarah crawled into the darkness of the shelter without hesitation. Nakoi quickly scattered the fire, using sand to douse the flames while preserving the coals beneath. He gathered his visible belongings, tucking them into the brush, leaving only a small bedroll and coffee tin beside the dying embers. Then he settled against a juniper tree, rifle across his lap, hat pulled low, the picture of a solitary traveler resting for the night. Nothing to suggest he'd traveled with a companion, nothing to betray the woman hiding mere feet away. As the sounds of horses and men grew ever closer, Nakoi touched the beaded wristband once more. His mother's voice seemed to whisper from it. "The measure of a warrior is not who he kills, but who he saves." He would be measured tonight. William Kingsley cut an impressive figure as he strode into the Copper Springs saloon. His tailored suit and polished boots marked him immediately as an Easterner, but it was his commanding presence that drew all eyes. Despite the dust of travel, he maintained the bearing of Boston aristocracy. Spine straight, chin lifted, gaze expectant. "I'm searching for my sister," he announced, laying a daguerreotype on the bar. Sarah Kingsley. She's unwell and has wandered off during our journey west. The barkeep studied the image, a young woman with fair hair and a reserved smile. The schoolteacher, he said with a nod. Pretty thing, quiet. William's knuckles whitened around his silver-handled walking stick. When did you last see her? 2 days past, maybe 3. Left sudden-like. Without warning? Without explanation. William's voice remained measured, but something in his tone caused conversations around them to falter. Town ain't big on explanations, mister. The barkeep shifted uncomfortably. Marshall might know more. I'll speak with him directly. William placed a gold coin on the counter, and I'll need rooms. For myself and my associates. Outside, 3 men waited with the horses, rough-looking hired guns, who'd joined William in Tucson. Their presence had raised eyebrows, but William had explained them away as security for the dangerous territories. Now they lounged against the hitching post, eyeing the town's women with undisguised interest. We got a direction. The tallest one, Reese, asked as William emerged. She was here, William replied. Recently. Later, alone in his hotel room, William removed his jacket and waistcoat with methodical precision, hanging each carefully despite the shabby accommodations. From his valise, he withdrew a leather-bound journal and a silver flask. The journal fell open to a page of careful calculations, bloodline percentages, family trees, notations about purity and heritage. William traced the lines connecting his name to Sarah's, then to the names he'd already selected for their future children, Elizabeth, Edward, William Jr. So close, he murmured, taking a long drink from the flask. So very close. He'd nearly had her in Santa Fe, had seen her boarding the southbound stage just as his train arrived. The station master remembered her well. A pretty young lady traveling alone was memorable. William had followed, always one step behind. His rage building with each passing mile, the walking stick gleamed in the lamplight. William ran his fingers along its silver handle, then twisted it to reveal the 8-inch blade hidden within. A gentleman's weapon, passed down through generations of Kingsley men. His father had used it once to deter an overly persistent business rival. William had used it 3 times already. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Enter," he called. Quickly concealing the blade, Marshal Frank Tilman stood in the doorway, hat in hand, a weathered man with shrewd eyes that had seen enough of the world to recognize trouble. "Mr. Kingsley, heard you're looking for your sister." "Indeed." William gestured to a chair, the perfect host even in these crude surroundings. "She's quite unwell, I'm afraid. Delusions, paranoia. Our parents' passing affected her deeply." The marshal remained standing. "Miss Kingsley seemed sound enough while teaching our children. The calm periods between episodes can be deceptive," William said smoothly. "I have documentation from her doctors in Boston." He withdrew an envelope from his case, offering it to the marshal. Tilman made no move to take it. "What makes you think she's still in the area?" "Where else would she go? A refined young woman alone in the wilderness?" William allowed himself a small, worried frown. "I fear for her safety every moment. Lot of places out there. Apache territory to the north, mining camps east. Mexico ain't far south." William's expression hardened momentarily before he recovered his concerned facade. "Then we must organize a proper search immediately. I'll pay handsomely for experienced men. Territory's big," the marshal said carefully, "and dangerous, especially for Easterners. I assure you, Marshal, I'm quite prepared for the rigors of frontier justice." William's hand rested casually on his walking stick. "I'll stop at nothing to recover my dear sister." Something in his voice, the slight emphasis on nothing, caused the marshal's eyes to narrow. "We do things differently out here. Mr. Kingsley, laws stretch thin, but it's still law." William offered his most disarming smile. "Of course, Marshal. I intend to work within its full boundaries." After Tilman departed, William returned to his journal, adding a new entry. Day 47 of pursuit. Located Sarah's latest hiding place. The marshal may prove problematic. Locals seem protective of her. No matter. She is mine by blood and birthright. What God has joined together in the womb, let no man put asunder. Dawn revealed what darkness had hidden. Sarah emerged from the shelter, blinking in the soft light, to find Nakoi already awake. He sat cross-legged beside a small fire, the flames barely visible in the morning brightness. His hands worked methodically, fletching arrows with hawk feathers. For a long moment neither spoke. The search party had passed within 50 yards of the camp during the night, close enough that Sarah could hear William's voice clearly, calling her name with that terrible gentleness that always preceded his worst moments. Only Nakoi's warning hand against her mouth had prevented her instinctive whimper of fear. "They will return," Nakoi said finally, not looking up from his work. Sarah nodded, wrapping her arms around herself. "He doesn't give up. Not ever. The tall one, your brother, he is not right in the head." A simple observation, but Sarah felt relief flood through her at hearing someone else acknowledge what she'd known for years. "No," she whispered. "He's not." Nakoi gestured toward a small bundle wrapped in leaves. "Eat." Inside, Sarah found cornmeal cakes, still warm from the fire. She hesitated. "I did not poison it," Nakoi said, a hint of dry humor in his voice. "I didn't think—" Sarah began, then stopped when she saw the slight curve of his mouth. She ate slowly, savoring food she hadn't realized she needed so desperately. "We must move camp," he said when she'd finished. "Higher, where horses cannot easily follow." "I'll slow you down," Sarah admitted. "I'm not used to wilderness." Nakoi's appraising gaze traveled from her torn dress to her impractical shoes. "Yes, you will." He rose in a fluid motion. "But they will expect you to go south, toward the town or the border." "We go north." The day passed in grueling silence. Nakoi moved with effortless grace through the landscape, pausing occasionally for Sarah to catch up. He never offered help directly, but would sometimes point out easier paths or hand her his water skin without comment. By midday, they reached a small plateau overlooking the valley. Sarah sank to the ground, muscles trembling from the unaccustomed exertion. She had long abandoned any attempt to preserve her already ruined dress, tearing the hem to allow easier movement. "Your brother," Nakoi said, breaking a long silence. "He wants to marry you?" The bluntness of the question startled her. "He believes we should continue the family line, keep the bloodline pure." Speaking the words aloud to another person made them sound even more horrifying. Nakoi nodded, his expression revealing nothing. "Some tribes allow cousin marriage, never brother and sister. It's forbidden among my people too," Sarah said. "But William thinks we're special, above normal rules. Men who believe they are above rules are the most dangerous kind." They made camp as the sun descended, a natural alcove beneath an overhanging rock, sheltered from view. Nakoi disappeared briefly, returning with a rabbit he'd snared. He skinned and cleaned it with practiced efficiency, then spitted it over a tiny, nearly smokeless fire. As the meat cooked, he unexpectedly spoke of his own family. Simple facts stated without emotion. A wife named Nasha. 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, all gone 5 years now. Sarah listened, offering no platitudes, recognizing the gift of trust in his words. When he fell silent, she spoke of Boston, of music lessons and books, of her mother's gentle wisdom and her father's quiet strength, of life before William changed. When the rabbit was done, Nakoi divided it precisely in half with his knife. He offered Sarah her portion on a broad leaf. "I can't take half," she protested. "It's your food, your land. If you do not eat, you will grow weak," he said pragmatically. "If you grow weak, you will slow us down further. If you slow us down further, your brother may find us. If your brother finds us, we both die." He held the meat out again. "So, you eat half." The simple logic made her smile, her first genuine smile in weeks. Night fell. Across the valley, torches moved in the darkness. William's search party still hunting. Sarah shivered despite the mild evening. "He won't stop looking," she whispered. "No," Nakoi agreed. "But neither will we stop hiding." He glanced at her, his expression softening fractionally. "Sleep now. Tomorrow will be harder." As Sarah curled beneath her blanket, a strange thought occurred to her. For the first time since her parents' deaths, she was in the presence of someone who wanted nothing from her except her survival. Copper Springs buzzed with speculation. The schoolteacher's disappearance and her brother's dramatic arrival had given the small settlement more excitement than the discovery of a new silver vein. Never trusted her, Martha Wilson declared over dry goods at Jennings' general store. Too quiet, too educated. Aiding something, mark my words. Eliza Jenkins, the blacksmith's wife, sniffed disapprovingly. She taught our children their letters. Did it well, too. That brother of hers gives me the willies, whispered Jennings, leaning across the counter. Something ain't right in those eyes. The conversation halted as the store's door swung open. William Kingsley entered, removing his hat with practiced courtesy. His gaze swept the suddenly silent store, lips curving in what resembled a smile, but never reached his eyes. Ladies, Mr. Jennings, I wonder if I might inquire about supplies for an extended search. Outside, William's hired men distributed freshly printed notices. Missing Sarah Kingsley, mentally unwell and in danger, reward for information leading to her safe return. At the Blue Hen Saloon, Marshal Frank Tilman studied one such notice, a deep furrow between his brows. Something about the Kingsley situation had been troubling him since their first meeting. He'd sent a telegraph to his counterpart in Santa Fe the previous evening, requesting information on the siblings' time there. You don't look convinced. Marshal, observed Dr. Thomas Brannigan, sliding onto the neighboring stool. The town's only physician was a shrewd judge of character, a necessity when treating both cowboys and card cheats. Miss Kingsley didn't strike me as unstable, Tilman replied carefully. Taught our children for 6 weeks without incident. Medical conditions can be unpredictable, the doctor noted. Though I agree there was nothing in her manner to suggest mental fragility, her brother's offering $50 to anyone who joins his search party. Generous, too. Generous for a simple family matter. Tilman folded the notice deliberately, especially when he's already got those 3 gunmen with him. Across town, in the modest building that served as both church and meeting hall, William stood before a gathering of Copper Springs' most influential citizens. The schoolhouse bell had been brought in and now stood on the table beside him, a tangible reminder of Sarah's role in the community. My sister's condition deteriorated following our parents' deaths, William explained, his cultured voice grave with concern. The doctors in Boston recommended a change of climate, which is why we journeyed west. I had business in Denver and left her in Santa Fe, believing the quiet would be beneficial. He paced slowly, the perfect picture of a worried brother. Instead, she slipped away, consumed by paranoid delusions. William paused, seeming to struggle with emotion. She believes I wish her harm, that I harbor inappropriate feelings toward her. Murmurs of sympathy rippled through the gathering. How awful, said Mrs. Pemberton. The banker's wife, the shame of such accusations, added Reverend Stanley. To bear such slander from your own blood, William bowed his head. I seek only to bring her home safely for treatment. I fear what may happen to her alone in this wilderness. What if she's not alone? The question came from young Jake Turner, who helped his father run the livery stable. All eyes turned to him and he reddened but continued. I was exercising the Anderson mare 2 mornings back, up near Eagle Ridge. Saw smoke from a campfire. Could have been that Apache fella, the one who trades with McAllister sometimes. William's expression remained concerned, but his eyes sharpened with predatory interest. An Apache? Do you believe my sister might have encountered this? Individual? Nakoi keeps to himself, Marshal Tilman interjected from the doorway. Doesn't trouble the town, unless he's taken a white woman, muttered someone in the crowd. Or she sought him out, countered McAllister, the trading post owner. He's got healing skills. Maybe she's sick, confused. William reached for the schoolhouse bell, lifting it with reverent care. Its clear tone cut through the growing debate as he rang it once. Commanding attention, my friends, he said, voice heavy with purpose. If my sister is with this Apache, whether by choice or coercion, we must find them. I'll double the reward for anyone who brings me information leading to Sarah's recovery. As the meeting dispersed, only Marshal Tilman noticed the slight tremor in William's hand as he replaced the bell, not the tremor of worry, but of barely contained anticipation. Later, alone in the telegraph office, Tilman read the newly arrived response from Santa Fe. His weathered face darkened with each line. Inquiry regarding Kingsley siblings. Stop Sarah. Kingsley fled boarding. House in night stop. Landlady reported brother's behavior. Extremely controlling stop. Local doctor examined bruising on Sarah's wrists. Stop exercise caution with William Kingsley. Stop 3 days into their mountain refuge. Nakoi froze in mid-motion. The rabbit skin he was scraping suddenly forgotten. Sarah, who had been awkwardly attempting to mend her torn dress with yucca fiber, recognized his alertness immediately. "What is it?" she whispered, her hands stilling. "Riders, 3, maybe 4. Nakohe's eyes narrowed as he scanned the canyon below. Coming from the settlement, Sarah felt her breath catch. "William?" "Cannot tell yet." Nakoi moved with silent efficiency, gathering essential supplies. "We must go now." Their small camp disappeared in minutes. Nakoi scattered the fire ashes, brushed away footprints, and arranged branches to conceal where they had slept. Sarah worked alongside him, her movements less practiced, but equally determined. As they prepared to leave, Nakoi knelt beside their cold fire pit. With deliberate care, he arranged 7 stones in a pattern that seemed random to Sarah's untrained eye. "What are you doing?" she asked, making a sign. For anyone who knows how to read it, a sign saying what? Nakoi's mouth curved slightly. "That 2 Apache headed northwest from here, toward the high lakes." Sarah glanced involuntarily to the southeast path they would actually take. "A false trail. Your brother hires trackers, maybe good ones. But most white men see only what they expect to see." They climbed higher into the rocky terrain, Nakoi choosing a path that left minimal traces. Sarah's muscles had begun to adapt to the daily exertion, though her city-bred body still protested the harsh conditions. By midday, they reached a narrow ledge, offering a clear view of the approach to their abandoned camp. Nakoi motioned for Sarah to remain absolutely still as they watched. The search party emerged from the tree line below, 4 riders, just as Nakoi had predicted. 3 were strangers to Sarah, rough-looking men with the weathered features of frontier mercenaries. The 4th made her blood run cold. William sat tall in the saddle, impeccably dressed despite the rugged terrain. Even at this distance, Sarah could see the rigid set of his shoulders that always betrayed his rage. The one in front, the one dressed like a city. "Man, that's William," she whispered. Nakoi studied her brother with narrowed eyes. "He moves like he owns everything he sees. He believes he does." They watched as the men dismounted at the campsite. 2 began searching the perimeter, while William stood imperiously in the center, directing their efforts. The 4th man, wearing a battered cavalry hat, crouched where Nakoi had placed the stone marker. "Tracker," Nakoi murmured. "Not Apache. Maybe Ute, or white man who learned from Indians." The tracker pointed northwest, toward the false trail. William nodded sharply, and Sarah could almost hear his commanding tone as he gathered the men to remount. Her breath released slowly as they rode away from the camp, following Nakoi's deception. "It worked," she breathed. "For now," Nakoi cautioned. "The tracker," he hesitated. "He may suspect something." They remained motionless until the search party disappeared from view, then continued their careful journey southeast, toward what Nakoi had described as a sacred place known to few outside his tribe. As dusk approached, Sarah noticed Nakoi repeatedly scanning their back trail. His tension was contagious. "You think they realized the trick," she said. "It wasn't a question. The tracker is no fool. If he convinces your brother to return." Sarah swallowed hard. "How far to this sacred place?" 2 days, maybe 3 in your condition." "I'll move faster," she promised. Nakoi looked at her appraisingly. "You're stronger than you were." "Still not strong enough." Before Sarah could respond, Nakoi suddenly stiffened. In one fluid motion, he pulled her down behind a large boulder, his body shielding hers. His hand covered her mouth, an unnecessary precaution. Terror had already stolen her voice. A lone rider moved through the landscape below them, separated from the main party. The tracker, methodically quartering the terrain, his gaze sweeping the rocky slopes. He paused directly beneath their position, studying the ground. Sarah could feel Nakoi's heart pounding against her back, matching the frantic rhythm of her own. The tracker removed his hat, wiping sweat from his brow as he surveyed the area. For one terrible moment his eyes seemed to look directly at their hiding place. An eagle's cry pierced the silence. The tracker's head turned toward the sound, momentarily distracted. When he looked back, whatever he might have seen was lost in the deepening shadows of evening. With a last, lingering survey, the man replaced his hat and turned his horse. Riding off to rejoin the main party, neither Sarah nor Nakoi moved for long minutes. When he finally released her, Sarah found herself shaking uncontrollably, not just from fear, but from the realization of how close they had come to discovery. "We travel through the night," Nakoi said quietly. "No fire, no rest until dawn." Sarah nodded, knowing their survival depended on putting as much distance as possible between themselves and William's increasingly skilled pursuit. "I won't slow us down," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Nakoi studied her face in the fading light. "No," he agreed. "I believe you won't. What is your word for this?" Sarah pointed to the soaring hawk circling above them. "Tsaidi yahi," Nakoi replied, his pronunciation slow and deliberate for her benefit. Sarah's tongue stumbled over the unfamiliar sounds. Nakoi watched her repeated attempts with surprising patience until she managed a reasonable approximation. And this, she touched the rough bark of a juniper tree. Due Nadlishin. 5 days had passed since their narrow escape from William's tracker. They had traveled mostly by night, resting during the hottest hours when pursuit was least likely. Now, in the relative safety of a hidden valley that Nakoi assured her few white men had ever seen, they had established a temporary camp. The small notebook Sarah had carried in her dress pocket, once intended for lesson plans, had become their shared dictionary. She wrote carefully, English on one side, Apache phonetics on the other, creating a bridge between their worlds. "Why do you wish to learn these words?" Nakoi asked, as he prepared a desert tea from plants Sarah couldn't identify. "Soon you will return to your people." Sarah looked up from her writing. "I'm not sure who my people are anymore." The admission surprised her as much as it seemed to surprise him. "Besides, it passes the time." Nakoi nodded, accepting this practical explanation. But Sarah sensed he understood the deeper truth, that learning his language was her way of acknowledging the gift of protection he had given her. "Your dress," he said, gesturing to her now filthy and repeatedly mended garment. "It is not good for this place." Sarah glanced down ruefully. It wasn't meant for wilderness living. Nakoi disappeared into the small shelter and returned with a bundle wrapped in rabbit skin. Inside was a simple dress made of soft buckskin, decorated with modest beadwork at the neckline. "It belonged to my wife," he said, his voice matter-of-fact, though Sarah noticed how his fingers lingered on the beadwork. "You are of similar size." Sarah touched the garment hesitantly. "I couldn't possibly—" "It is practical," Nakoi interrupted. "Nasha has no need for it now." The simple statement contained volumes of unspoken grief. Sarah accepted the dress with appropriate solemnity, understanding that this was more than a practical solution to her tattered clothing. It was, perhaps, the greatest gesture of trust he had shown her. That evening, wearing the buckskin dress that moved with her body instead of fighting against it, Sarah felt a strange sense of liberation. Her hair, once carefully pinned according to Boston fashion, now hung in a single braid down her back. "Tell me of your Boston," Nakoi said unexpectedly as they sat beside the small fire. "What kind of place makes women who run from their brothers?" The question might have offended her once. Now understanding his direct manner, Sarah found herself describing the elegant Kingsley home on Beacon Hill, the suffocating social expectations, the rigid structures that valued appearance above all else. And yet, Nakoi observed, this place gave you knowledge of books and numbers that many here do not have. Yes, Sarah acknowledged. I was fortunate in my education, if not in my family. Among the Apache, family is everything. The clan protects its own, as my brother believes he's protecting me. Sarah asked bitterly. Nakoi's expression darkened. That is not protection. That is ownership. He stared into the fire. When the Bluecoats came to take us to the reservation, they said it was for our protection, too. For the first time, Nakoi spoke in detail about the massacre at White Rock Creek. His voice remained steady, but Sarah saw the muscle tightening in his jaw as he described finding his family. His wife, Nesha, had been shot while protecting their youngest son. His daughter had knife wounds defending herself. His eldest son had been burned in the wickiup. When he fell silent, Sarah realized she was crying. Not the delicate tears of Boston society, but silent, streaming grief for people she had never known. I think, she said finally, finding her voice, that men like my brother and the soldiers who killed your family come from the same darkness. They believe their desires matter more than other people's lives. Nakoi looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Perhaps, he said, not all white eyes are blind after all. That night, Sarah wrote in their shared notebook by firelight, careful not to wake Nakoi, who slept across the fire. On the blank page, separate from their word translation, she wrote, I came to him as a stranger, an enemy by birth and history. He had every reason to turn me away. Instead, he offered protection without condition. What word exists in any language for such an unexpected gift? Marshal Frank Tilman spread the telegraph messages across his desk, arranging them in chronological order. The picture they painted turned his stomach. 7 replies from 7 different towns, each adding another dark stroke to the portrait of William Kingsley from Denver. Kingsley's siblings stayed royal. Hotel March 12-17, stop hotel staff. Reported disturbing behavior. Stop Sarah Kingsley appeared. Fearful stop-room maid observed bruising on arms. Stop from Santa Fe. Kingsley departure followed. Disappearance of young woman resembling Sarah. Stop body discovered 3 days later. Stop investigation, ongoing stop from. Albuquerque William Kingsley inquired about runaway sister. Stop mentioned. Mental instability. Stop left abruptly when questioned. Stop. The shot had come from the east, perhaps half a mile away. Too far to be an immediate threat, but close enough to warrant caution. He found Marshal Frank Tilman, slumped against a boulder, blood soaking his left side. The lawman's horse was nowhere to be seen, likely spooked by the gunfire. A crumpled map lay in Tilman's lap, its edges dark with dried blood. Marshal, Nakoi said quietly, materializing beside the wounded man. Tilman's eyes flew open, hand instinctively reaching for his revolver before recognition dawned. Nakoi, he rasped. Found you after all. Who shot you? Kingsley's men. Tilman winced as he shifted position. Ambushed me last night. Been trying to reach you since dawn. Nakoi examined the wound with practiced hands. The bullet had passed through the marshal's side, painful but not immediately fatal if the bleeding could be stopped and infection prevented. Sarah Kingsley, Tilman managed. Is she with you? Nakoi's expression revealed nothing. Why do you ask? To warn her. Her brother, Tilman broke into a coughing fit. He's killed before. Other women. Got proof now, telegrams. Decision made, Nakoi helped the marshal to his feet. Can you walk? Done worse with worse, Tilman grimaced. Lead on. The journey back to the canyon was slow and painful. Twice they stopped to allow Tilman to rest. The marshal clutched the bloodied map in his hand, refusing to relinquish it, even as Nakoi supported most of his weight. McAllister drew it, Tilman explained during one rest. Said you'd mentioned this place once. Spirit Canyon, and you came alone, knowing Kingsley would follow? Tilman's weathered face showed a hint of wry humor despite his pain. Badge ain't just for show, son. Sarah's face drained of color when she saw them enter the canyon. Marshal Tilman. Miss Kingsley, the marshal acknowledged weakly. Seems we both had reason to seek unusual company. They settled Tilman near the fire. Sarah boiled water for bandages, while Nakoi examined the map the marshal had brought, crude but accurate enough to have led him to the canyon's vicinity. "How did you get this wound?" Sarah asked as she helped clean it. "Followed McAllister's directions yesterday morning," Tilman explained, wincing. "Your brother and his men caught up to me by nightfall. Seems they'd been watching the trading post. One of his hired guns recognized me, shot before I could draw. And William," Sarah's voice trembled slightly, "cold as ice. Told them to leave me for the coyotes. Said I'd interfered in family matters once too often." Nakoi's hands stilled as he dressed the wound. "They believe you are dead?" "For now. Played possum when they checked. But they're headed this way, following my trail." The marshal gripped Sarah's wrist. "Your brother's dangerous, Miss Kingsley. More than you know. I know exactly how dangerous he is." "Marshal," Sarah replied quietly. "No, ma'am, I don't think you do." Tilman described the telegrams he'd received. The pattern of violence that followed William like a shadow. 2 young women dead, both resembling you. Both last seen with him. Sarah's face went ashen. "He wouldn't, he would," Tilman said grimly. "And he will. He's convinced the town you've been kidnapped by Apache marauders. Half the men in Copper Springs are probably joining his search party as we speak. The implications settled over them like a shroud. Not just William and his hired guns now, but potentially a full posse of angry townsmen whipped into a frenzy about a white woman taken by an Apache. "We need to leave," Sarah said. "All of us." Nakoi shook his head. "The marshal cannot travel far with that wound. And there is no place safer than here. Except they're coming here," Tilman pointed out. "Following my trail straight to this canyon." Sarah looked between the 2 men, understanding dawning. "You're saying we should stand and fight?" "I'm saying there's no running from this," the marshal replied. "Not anymore." As darkness fell, they maintained a small fire for warmth, while Tilman drifted in and out of consciousness, fever beginning to take hold despite their care. Sarah sat beside him, regularly cooling his brow with water from the spring. "You're Apache," Tilman murmured during a lucid moment. His voice low enough that Nakoi, keeping watch at the canyon entrance, couldn't hear. "He looks at you the way a man looks at something precious." Sarah glanced toward Nakoi's silhouette against the night sky. "We've kept each other alive. Nothing more." The marshal's feverish eyes held surprising clarity. "Life out here teaches you to recognize what matters. Time runs different when every day might be your last." Sarah adjusted his blanket, avoiding his knowing gaze. "Rest, Marshal. Save your strength." But as she moved away to check their dwindling supplies, Sarah found herself wondering how many more days any of them had left, and what remains unsaid between herself and Nakoi that she might come to regret. William Kingsley stood apart from his men, watching them prepare for the day's hunt with cold detachment. The firelight cast his aristocratic features in harsh relief, deepening the shadows beneath his eyes. He hadn't slept properly in days. "You certain the marshal was heading to this Spirit Canyon place?" Reese asked, checking his rifle's action. "I'm certain," William replied, his Boston accent crisp in the dawn air. "And I'm certain my sister is there with her savage." He reached into his coat pocket and withdrew an ornate silver hairbrush. His mother's, and now Sarah's by inheritance, though she had left it behind in her hasty flight. William ran his thumb across the bristles almost tenderly. "We'll find her today," he murmured to the brush. "Won't we, Sarah?" Reese exchanged uncomfortable glances with the other hired guns. The Kingsley job had seemed straightforward at first: find a runaway sister, collect a handsome reward. But their employer's behavior had grown increasingly erratic. Yesterday he'd watched without emotion as they shot the town marshal and left him to die. "Mr. Kingsley," Reese ventured, "the posse from town will be joining us by midday." "Maybe we should wait." "We will proceed immediately," William cut him off, his voice suddenly sharp. "The townsmen are useful for covering more ground, but they're not to interfere when we find her." "Is that clear?" Reese nodded, recognizing the dangerous edge in his employer's tone. William turned away, stroking the silver brush as he stared toward the distant mesas. His mind drifted back to Boston, to the night he'd discovered Sarah's empty bedroom. The carefully made bed, the note left on her dressing table. "I cannot be what you want me to be. Please don't follow," but following was inevitable. They were bound by blood and destiny. The Kingsley line must continue, pure and untainted. Father had explained it all to William when he was just 13, the special heritage they carried, the responsibility to maintain their superior bloodline. Mother had objected initially, but Father had corrected her thinking, just as William would correct Sarah's. "Sir?" One of the men interrupted his reverie. Trackers picked up sign of the marshal's passage. Heading east toward the canyon, William nodded crisply, tucking the brush back into his pocket. "Prepare to move out." As they rode, William found himself remembering the other girls, the ones who had resembled Sarah in some small way. The maid in Boston with the same color hair, the young woman in Denver with similar blue eyes, the shopkeeper's daughter in Santa Fe with Sarah's delicate hands. None of them had understood their purpose, to satisfy the urges until Sarah was ready. Each had rejected his attentions, necessitating correction. Each correction had been regrettable but instructive. He would not make the same mistakes with Sarah, the tracker, a half-Ute named Collins, who had learned his skills from both white and Indian teachers, raised his hand suddenly, signaling a halt. "Blood here," Collins announced, crouching beside a sun-baked rock. "The marshal's, I reckon. He's wounded bad, but still moving." William dismounted, examining the dark stains with clinical interest. "And his direction?" Collins pointed to a narrow gap in the red rock formations ahead. "That way, into the high canyon country, Spirit Canyon," William confirmed. The tracker nodded. "Sacred place for the Apache. Good defensive position, too." William felt a surge of rage at the thought of Sarah in that place, with that man, the savage who had stolen what belonged to the Kingsley bloodline. His hands trembled slightly as he withdrew the hairbrush again, running his fingers across its smooth silver back. "Soon," he whispered to it. "Sir." Reese approached cautiously. Scout spotted dust to the south, likely the town posse catching up. William barely acknowledged the information, his attention fixed on the canyon entrance ahead. So close now, after weeks of pursuit across the territories, the endless calculations and corrections, the sacrifices made in the name of blood purity. The end was finally within reach. "Mr. Kingsley," Reese pressed. "Your orders?" William's eyes refocused, cold and clear. "We continue immediately. When we locate them, I want the savage killed on sight. The marshal, too, if he still lives. And your sister." William caressed the silver brush, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Sarah is to be taken alive, unharmed. She doesn't yet understand what must happen, but she will." "And the townsfolk?" Reese asked. "They're coming to rescue a kidnapped woman, not to—" "The townspeople will see what I tell them to see," William interrupted, his tone suddenly vicious. "An Apache who abducted a white woman, a murdering savage who killed their marshal. They'll do exactly what men like them always do." The men shifted uncomfortably, but none dared challenge him. The money was too good, and something in William Kingsley's eyes promised consequences for disobedience. As they mounted up, William glanced south toward the approaching dust cloud of the town posse. Useful idiots, fueled by the same prejudices he'd observed and exploited throughout their journey west. A simple story. White woman, Apache kidnapper, and they'd assembled without question, eager to play their parts in what they saw as frontier justice. What none of them understood was that this story had been written long before Sarah ever set foot in Arizona territory. It had begun in the Kingsley nursery in Boston, when William had first looked upon his infant sister and heard his father's whispered instruction. "She belongs to our bloodline. One day she will be yours." William patted his pocket where the silver brush rested. "Today," he promised it. "Today we bring her home. We have 3 choices," Nakoi said, his voice calm despite the gravity of their situation. "None of them good." The morning sun bathed Spirit Canyon in golden light, belying the darkness of their circumstances. Marshal Tilman sat propped against the canyon wall, his wound cleaned, but his face gray with pain. Sarah knelt beside him, concern etched in her features. "William will be here by midday," the marshal said, his breathing labored, with his men and likely half the town behind them. Nakoi reached into the small leather pouch at his belt, withdrawing 3 smooth stones. He placed them on the ground before them, one white, one red, one black. "The stones of decision," he explained, noting Sarah's questioning look. "My father taught that when the path is unclear, we must see all possibilities clearly." He touched the white stone. "First choice. We stay and fight. The canyon offers protection. Limited access. High ground. 3 against 20 or more?" The marshal asked skeptically. "We would have surprise," Nakoi acknowledged. "But not victory." His finger moved to the red stone. "Second choice. You two leave. I stay to delay them." Sarah's head snapped up. "No, I am one man," Nakoi continued as if she hadn't spoken. "My death would be expected. An Apache fighting to the end. But it would give you time to escape." "Absolutely not," Sarah said, her voice firm. "We're not leaving you to die." Nakohe's eyes met hers, something unspoken passing between them. He nodded slightly, then touched the black stone. "Third choice. We all leave, taking a path few know. There is a way through the canyon that leads to a network of caves. Beyond them, a valley where some of my people still live free from the reservation." Marshal Tilman gestured to his wound. "I can barely sit up, let alone travel through caves. And William's tracker will follow whatever trail we leave," Sarah added. Silence fell as they contemplated their impossible situation. Finally the marshal shifted, wincing with the effort. "There's a fourth option," he said grimly. "Sarah returns to Copper Springs, alone, under my protection as the law." "William would find a way around the law," Sarah replied. "He always does. Not if there's evidence against him," the marshal countered. "The telegrams are in your office," Nakoi finished, "where William has likely already searched." The marshal's face fell. "Damn, you're right." Sarah stood, pacing the small clearing. "What if I confront him?" "In front of the townspeople. Tell them everything. Your word against his," the marshal said. "A respected businessman versus a hysterical woman. I've seen how such things end." Nakoi had been silent, studying the 3 stones. Now he looked up, decision evident in his features. "We separate," he said firmly. "But not as you think. The marshal returns to town." "I can't make that ride," Tilman interrupted. "You can with help," Nakoi replied. "Sarah will take you." Sarah started to protest, but Nakoi raised a hand. "Listen, the marshal is known to these people. His word carries weight. If he arrives wounded, with you guiding his horse, the story changes. Not an Apache kidnapping a white woman, but an Apache helping her save the town's marshal." Understanding dawned in Sarah's eyes. "And William's men shot the marshal. If he testifies to that, it creates doubt," the marshal agreed slowly. "Undermines William's story. While you two ride for town," Nakoi continued, "I will leave an obvious trail leading away from the canyon. William will believe we've all fled and split his forces." The plan had merit, but Sarah saw the flaw immediately. "William himself will follow my trail, not yours. He wants me, not you." "No," Nakoi said with certainty. "His hatred for me now equals his obsession with you. He will come himself, believing you are with me." The marshal nodded grimly. "He's right. Men like William can't tolerate being bested, especially by someone they consider beneath them. And when he catches you?" Sarah asked, her voice tight with fear. Nakoi's expression revealed nothing. "I will lead him far from here, into the high country where even his tracker will struggle." "And then what?" Sarah pressed. "Die alone in the wilderness?" "Live or die as the spirits will it," Nakoi replied. "As we all do." The simplicity of his acceptance silenced her protests. Marshal Tilman watched their exchange with knowing eyes. "It's the best chance," he said quietly. "For all of us." Sarah looked between them, then at the 3 stones still laid out on the ground. After a long moment, she knelt and picked up the red one, closing her fingers around it. "I'll take the marshal to town," she agreed finally. "But I want your word that you'll stay alive, Nakoi. That you'll find your way back." Nakoi held her gaze. "I have survived this long." It wasn't the promise she wanted, but Sarah recognized it was the most honest one he could offer. "We leave within the hour," Nakoi decided, standing. "The marshal's horse returned in the night. It will carry both of you, As they prepared, gathering only essential supplies, Sarah found herself watching Nakoi's every movement, committing them to memory. The careful way he checked his rifle, the gentleness with which he helped the marshal, the single glance he cast toward the wooden comb he had carved for her, now tucked securely in her hair. Their lives, so unexpectedly intertwined, were about to separate again, perhaps forever. The thought left an ache deeper than any physical wound. Nakoi left an obvious trail, deliberate scuff marks, broken branches, disturbed stones. A path any tracker could follow, leading north into the maze of ravines and mesas, where pursuit would be most difficult. He moved swiftly, putting distance between himself and Spirit Canyon, where Sarah and the marshal had headed east toward town. The strategy had been simple: divide William's forces. Draw the most dangerous hunters away from Sarah, and lead them into terrain where one Apache had the advantage over many white men. Nakoi had survived 5 years in these mountains by understanding their secrets: hidden water sources, concealed paths, places where a man could vanish like smoke. He paused on a high ridge, scanning the back trail. Nothing yet, but they would come. William Kingsley's hatred would ensure it. Hatred was predictable that way, a compass always pointing toward its object. By midday, Nakoi spotted them, 4 riders following his trail with single-minded determination. William rode in front, his proper Eastern clothing incongruous against the harsh landscape. Beside him, the tracker studied the ground with professional interest. Behind them, 2 of the hired guns, rifles ready, exactly as planned. William had taken the bait, believing Sarah was with Nakoi. The rest of his men, along with the town posse, must have followed the marshal's trail, a complication. But one Sarah and Tilman would have to handle themselves. Nakoi continued north, maintaining his pace, leaving just enough sign to keep them following, but not enough to close the distance too quickly. By late afternoon, he had led them deep into a labyrinth of narrow canyons where horses struggled to find footing, and riders were forced to dismount and lead their animals. Perfect. Concealed on a ledge above a narrow passage, Nakoi watched the 4 men enter the canyon below. The tracker moved cautiously, reading the signs. The hired guns scanned the high rocks, sensing the trap but unable to locate its specifics. William showed no such caution, his face twisted with frustrated rage. "Find them," William snapped when the tracker paused. "They can't be far now. Something ain't right," the tracker muttered. "Trail's too obvious." "Because they're desperate," William insisted. "The savage knows we're close." Nakoi had positioned stones carefully along the upper rim. Now he dislodged one with his foot. It clattered down the canyon wall, followed by several more. Not enough to cause injury, but sufficient to startle the horses. The resulting chaos was immediate. Horses reared and pulled free from their handlers. One of the hired guns was thrown against the canyon wall. The other fired blindly upward, the shot echoing deafeningly in the confined space. Nakoi used the distraction to move to his next position, a narrow chimney between rock faces that would take him to the canyon floor beyond the riders. The plan was working: confusion, separation, fear. The elements that had kept him alive when the Bluecoats hunted him years ago. Then, everything changed. As Nakoi descended the chimney, his rifle slung across his back. The strap caught on a protruding rock. He jerked it free, but the movement dislodged loose stones. The small avalanche revealed his position. "There!" shouted the tracker, pointing. Gunfire erupted. Bullets whined off stone around Nakoi as he scrambled for cover. One round struck his rifle, splintering the wooden stock. The force of the impact sent him sprawling onto a ledge 15 feet above the canyon floor. Pain lanced through his leg as he landed badly, not broken but badly twisted. Nakoi pulled himself behind a boulder as more bullets struck around him. "Hold your fire!" William's voice cut through the gunfire. "I want him alive!" Silence fell. Nakoi checked his damaged rifle, useless now, the action shattered by the bullet. His knife remained at his belt, but against 3 armed men, it offered little advantage. "Apache!" William called out, "Where is my sister?" Nakoi remained silent. Every moment William spent focused on him was another moment Sarah moved farther away. "I know she's with you," William continued. "Your savage tricks won't protect her from her destiny. The Kingsley bloodline must continue pure." The words confirmed everything Sarah had told him about her brother's madness. Nakoi shifted position carefully, assessing his options. The twisted ankle limited his mobility, but if he could reach the narrow passage to the east... "Perhaps I've been approaching this incorrectly." William's voice had taken on a conversational tone that was somehow more chilling than his rage. "You care for my sister, don't you, Savage? I see it now. How poetic. The noble Apache protecting the white woman." Footsteps crunched on gravel as William moved closer to Nakoi's position. "She'll never be yours," William continued. "Your kind and hers don't mix. But I'm a reasonable man. Tell me where Sarah is, and I'll let you live." "You have my word as a gentleman." Nakoi almost laughed at the absurdity. A gentleman's word from a man who hunted his own sister with murderous intent. "No." William sighed theatrically. "Very well. Jenkins, Reese, burn him out." Nakoi heard the distinctive sound of a match striking, followed by the whoosh of flames catching on something combustible. Smoke began to curl around the edges of his shelter. Time for a new plan. Gripping his knife, Nakoi prepared himself. If he was to die today, he would do so as a warrior, not cornered prey. And perhaps, if the spirits favored him, he might take William Kingsley with him, a final gift to the woman who had awakened something in him he'd thought long dead. "We need to stop," Sarah said, steadying Marshal Tilman as he swayed in the saddle. "You're bleeding again." They'd been traveling for hours, the marshal's horse carrying them both along the rocky trail toward Copper Springs. What should have been a half-day journey had stretched longer as they moved cautiously, watching for William's men. "Can't stop," Tilman muttered, his voice faint. "Town's not far now," but his ashen face and the fresh blood seeping through his bandages told a different story. Sarah guided the horse to a small stand of cottonwoods beside a dry creek bed, helping the marshal dismount. "Just need to rest a minute," Tilman gasped as she eased him against a tree trunk. Sarah examined his wound, her stomach tightening at the angry red streaks spreading outward. Infection. Without proper medical attention soon, the marshal wouldn't survive. "We'll rest briefly," she agreed, though she doubted a short rest would make much difference now. Every moment they delayed was another moment Nakoi faced William alone. The thought of Nakoi sent a pang through her chest. The Apache warrior had become more than her protector. He had become something she had no words for. Something impossible and yet undeniable. "Miss Kingsley," the marshal's raspy voice interrupted her thoughts. "If I don't make it, you will," Sarah insisted. "Listen to me." Tilman's weathered hand closed around her wrist with surprising strength. "The telegrams. Proof of your brother's crimes. Hidden under the floorboard beneath my desk. Third plank from the wall." Sarah nodded, committing the location to memory. "And this..." Tilman unpinned the silver star from his vest with trembling fingers. "Take it, show it in town. Symbol carries weight, even when I can't." "I can't take your badge," Sarah protested, "not giving it, lending it." A ghost of a smile crossed the marshal's pain-lined face. "Authority of the law. Against your brother's lies." Before Sarah could respond, hoofbeats sounded in the distance. She peered through the trees, her heart sinking as she made out a group of riders approaching from the direction of town. "They've found us," she whispered. "Who?" Tilman struggled to sit upright. "William?" "No, men from town." "The posse?" Sarah recognized several of the figures, the blacksmith, the livery owner, Dr. Brannigan. At least a dozen. Tilman pressed the badge into her palm. "Go to them, show this. Tell them everything. They'll never believe me over William. Some will." "Enough, maybe." The marshal's eyes were fading. "Only chance now." Sarah pinned the badge to her buckskin dress, Nasha's dress, and stepped out from the trees, leading the marshal's horse with her head held high. The approaching riders spotted her immediately, rifles rising. "That's far enough." Called Jenkins, the blacksmith who served as deputy when Tilman was absent. "Where's the marshal?" "Wounded," Sarah replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "By my brother's men." He needs Dr. Brannigan immediately. The men exchanged uncertain glances. Dr. Brannigan spurred his horse forward, but Jenkins held up a restraining hand. "Your brother said the Apache forced you to help him ambush the marshal." "My brother is a liar and a murderer," Sarah stated clearly, touching the marshal's badge. "Frank Tilman asked me to wear this until he can speak for himself." A murmur ran through the group. The badge carried weight just as Tilman had said. "Take me to the marshal," Dr. Brannigan insisted. Dismounting despite Jenkins' protests, Sarah led him to Tilman, whose condition had deteriorated further in just minutes. The doctor's expression grew grave as he examined the wound. "He needs to get to town immediately," Brannigan announced to the waiting men. "And I believe his story. These bullet wounds match what Miss Kingsley claims. This wasn't done by an Apache." Jenkins hesitated, clearly torn between William's version of events and the evidence before him. "Where is the Apache, then?" "Drawing my brother away," Sarah explained. "Saving the marshal's life. Saving mine?" She took a deep breath. "My brother is not what he seems. He's pursued me across half the country because he believes we should continue the family line together." The blunt statement caused several men to step back in shock and disgust. Sarah pressed her advantage. "Marshal Tilman has proof, telegrams from other towns where William has hurt people. We need to get the marshal to town and retrieve that evidence before William returns." The moment hung in balance. Then McAllister, the trading post owner, stepped forward. "I believe her," he said simply. "Nakoi's had a dozen chances to harm folks from town over the years. Never has. Kingsley, though," he spat on the ground. "Something not right about that man from day one." The scales tipped. Several men nodded in agreement. "We'll take the marshal in," Jenkins decided. "And hear the full story." "There's more," Sarah said urgently. "William and his men are hunting Nakoi in the northern canyons. He plans to kill him." "That's not our concern," Jenkins began, but Sarah cut him off. "Nakoi saved your marshal's life. He saved mine. And he's facing my brother alone, so I could bring Marshal Tilman to safety." McAllister stepped closer to Jenkins. "We can't just leave him to die, Deputy." A tense silence followed, broken only by the marshal's labored breathing as Dr. Brannigan worked to stabilize him. Finally, Jenkins nodded. "Half the men take the marshal to town," he ordered. "The rest come with me to find this Apache and Kingsley." As they prepared to move out, Dr. Brannigan approached Sarah. "You should come to town, Miss Kingsley. It's safer." Sarah looked toward the northern canyons where Nakoi had led William. Smoke rose faintly against the blue sky, a signal of danger she couldn't ignore. "No," she said firmly, touching the marshal's badge at her breast. "I'm going with the men to find Nakoi." Her tone left no room for argument. In Nasha's dress, with Tilman's badge, Sarah Kingsley was no longer the frightened woman who had fled Boston. She had become something new, something forged in desert hardship and unexpected love, something that would not be broken by William's madness. No matter what came next, Sarah would never forget the scene that greeted them in the northern canyon. Smoke billowed from a brush fire set against the rock wall where Nakoi had taken his last stand. William stood in the clearing below, his once immaculate clothing torn and dirty, raging at his men as they tried to flush out their quarry. "Burn it all!" William shouted, his refined accent distorted by fury. "Smoke him out like the animal he is." The arrival of Sarah and the townsmen changed everything in an instant. William froze mid-tirade, his face shifting from rage to a mask of fraternal concern so quickly it was almost comical. "Sarah! Thank God you're safe." He started toward her, arms outstretched. "Stay back, Kingsley," Jenkins ordered, raising his rifle. "Marshal Tilman's alive. Told us everything." William's facade cracked slightly. "The marshal is confused, delirious from his wounds. This savage has poisoned all your minds against me. Where is he?" Sarah demanded, scanning the smoke-filled ledges. "Where is Nakoi?" A movement caught her eye, a figure on a high ledge, partially concealed by smoke, favoring one leg. Relief flooded through her at the sight of him alive, though clearly injured. William followed her gaze, his expression hardening as he spotted Nakoi. In one fluid motion, he drew the hidden blade from his walking stick and lunged toward the rock face. "He'll never have you," William shouted, all pretense abandoned. "The bloodline is ours alone." William's face contorted at the implication. "You would choose this savage over your own blood? Your own destiny?" "I choose freedom," Sarah replied.
"From you?"
"From everything you represent," William's rage erupted. He lunged forward, blade aimed at Nakoi's heart. But his movement was wild, uncontrolled. Nakoi sidestepped despite his injured ankle, and William's momentum carried him past them. Toward the edge of the precipice, Sarah would never be certain afterward if William could have stopped himself. If the hand she and Nakoi both extended could have saved him. If her brother's madness had finally consumed even his instinct for self-preservation. What she remembered was William's face as he realized his fate. Not fear, but betrayal. As if the rocks rising to meet him had somehow broken a promise. The silence that followed his fall seemed to last an eternity. 3 weeks later, Sarah sat beside Nakoi on the porch of the small cabin at the edge of town. His splintered leg rested on a stool, healing slowly but steadily under the combined care of Dr. Brannigan's medical knowledge and Nakoi's traditional remedies. The events following William's death had unfolded with surprising grace. The telegrams from Marshal Tilman's office had confirmed William's history of violence. His hired men, eager to distance themselves from their former employer, had corroborated Sarah's account. The town, faced with undeniable evidence, had chosen justice over prejudice. Most surprisingly, they had extended that justice to include Nakoi. When Dr. Brannigan had insisted on treating the Apache's injuries at his office in town, no one had objected. When Sarah had refused to leave Nakoi's side during his recovery, the whispers had been curious rather than condemning, and when Marshal Tilman, still weak but recovering, had offered them the abandoned trapper's cabin on the town's outskirts, it had seemed the most natural solution to an impossible situation. "McAllister brought more supplies," Sarah said, gesturing to the packages on the porch. "And a letter from the Indian agent at the reservation." Nakoi's expression revealed nothing. "What does it say?" "Your cousin, Walking Thunder, has become an important voice there. He asks if you would consider visiting." Sarah hesitated. "He says there's a place for a healer among the people." Nakoi gazed toward the distant mountains. "And you? What place would there be for you?" The question contained all the uncertainty of their situation. An Apache man and a white woman, together in a world that had no easy category for what they had become to each other. "I would find my place," Sarah said simply. "As I have here." Nakoi's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. "The town tolerates us now. When memories of your brother fade, some things are changing," Sarah acknowledged, slowly. "Marshal Tilman speaks for us. Dr. Brannigan, too." From inside the cabin came the gentle bubbling of medicine brewing on the stove. Willow bark for pain, combined with herbs from Nakoi's traditions. Together, they had created something new, remedies neither purely Apache nor purely white, but effective nonetheless. Perhaps, Sarah thought, their future might follow the same pattern. "We have time," she said, squeezing his hand, "to decide, to heal, to see what comes next." Nakoi nodded, his usually stoic expression softening as he looked at her. "The Apache have a saying, life is lived forward, but understood backward." Sarah smiled, remembering their first desperate meeting, her plea for sanctuary, his unexpected mercy. "Then we have much to understand," she said softly, "and much life yet to live forward." On the porch rail, the marshal's badge caught the setting sun, glinting like a promise kept. Spring came to Copper Springs with unexpected gentleness. The desert bloomed briefly, wildflowers carpeting the landscape that had seemed so harsh to Sarah when she'd first arrived. Outside the cabin she now shared with Nakoi, neat rows of plants thrived in carefully tended soil, desert sage and echinacea beside chamomile and mint. healing traditions from two worlds growing side by side. 6 months had passed since William's death. 6 months of gradual healing, of cautious integration, of building something without precedent in either of their experiences. "Mrs. Peterson's youngest has the fever again," Sarah said, entering the cabin with a basket of fresh herbs. "She asked if we might have something to help." Nakoi nodded, setting aside the deer hide he was tanning. "The willow bark tea with honey, and the purple coneflower for strength." Sarah began preparing the remedy, her movements confident after months of learning under Nakoi's patient instruction. What had begun as necessity during their recovery had evolved into purpose. Their shared knowledge of healing becoming a bridge between cultures that benefited the entire community. Not everyone in Copper Springs approved, of course. Some families still crossed the street rather than pass directly by the Apache's woman and her savage husband. The church had made it clear that while they were welcome to attend services, their union would never receive formal blessing, but for each closed door, another had opened. Marshal Tilman, fully recovered and more determined than ever to uphold justice for all, had become their staunch ally. Dr. Brannigan regularly consulted with Nakoi on treatments that combined Western medicine with Apache wisdom. The school children, less burdened by prejudice than their parents, brought their small injuries to Miss Sarah and Mr. Nakoi with equal confidence. McAllister's wagon arrived, Nakoi commented, as Sarah bottled the herbal remedy. "He brings news from the reservation." Sarah looked up, studying his expression. "Your cousin again?" "Yes. The agent has agreed to allow me to visit without restriction." Nakoi's tone remained neutral, but Sarah had learned to read the subtle signs of emotion in his eyes. "They ask for a healer. Many are sick with the white man's diseases." The unspoken question hung between them. Since their first discussion months ago, the possibility of connecting with Nakoi's remaining family at the reservation had surfaced periodically. Each time they had set it aside, neither quite ready to test the fragile balance they had established in Copper Springs. "We could go," Sarah said softly. "For a visit, at least." Nakoi looked at her with surprise. "You would come to the reservation. Where else would I go?" The simplicity of her response belied its profound implications. "My place is with you, wherever that may be." Something shifted in Nakoi's expression, a softening, a wonder that had not diminished despite the months of shared life. "The agent might not permit it," he cautioned. "A white woman living among the Apache, then we'll return here," Sarah replied pragmatically, "or find somewhere new." "The world is changing, Nakoi. Perhaps not quickly enough, but it changes nonetheless." Later that evening, they sat on their porch as the sun set behind the distant mountains. Marshal Tilman had stopped by with news from town. A new railroad spur was coming through the territory, bringing more settlers, more change. "You two thought any more about that reservation visit?" he asked, declining Sarah's offer of coffee. Nakoi and Sarah exchanged glances. "We're considering it," Sarah answered. "There are people there who need help." Tilman nodded thoughtfully. "Territory's getting smaller for those who don't fit neat categories. Might not be a bad thing to have connections in more than one place." After he departed, Sarah leaned against Nakoi's shoulder, watching the first stars appear. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That life moves in circles," he replied. 5 years ago I believed I would die alone. The last of my family line, now—" He gestured to their small home, the garden, the life they had built together. "Now we create our own family," Sarah finished. "Our own traditions." In the comfortable silence that followed, Sarah reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her here, from the rigid confines of Boston society to this desert borderland where she had found freedom in the most unexpected of places. "Do you ever regret it?" Nakoi asked suddenly. "The choice you made?" Sarah knew he wasn't referring to William's death, but to the choice she had made afterward, to stay with Nakoi, to build a life that defied convention, to embrace the difficult path they now walked together. "Never," she said without hesitation. "Not for a single moment. From the herb garden came the soft rustling of evening wind, blending the scents of two healing traditions into something new and wholly their own. Like their shared life, neither fully Apache nor fully white, but something unique, resilient, and unexpectedly beautiful in a harsh world. The stars emerged fully now, the same stars that had witnessed Sarah's desperate arrival at Nakoi's camp months before. She had asked then for temporary sanctuary. She had found instead a permanent home, not in a place, but in the space between two worlds where they had created their own belonging.